Welcome back, my friends. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Silver Slayer, the channel that brings you silver videos every single day of the week. So make sure you subscribe and definitely click the bell so you instantly get notified anytime something important comes out. You will never miss a beat if you subscribe. It's your one-stop shop for anything related to silver. We have some juicy stuff to break down here, folks. I'm so glad I found this and I took it a step further and went on to find something else related to this that is going to add a bit more context. You'll see what I mean in a second. If you enjoyed this video, then please like the video because this is some good stuff. It might be a little controversial, even though I don't see how this topic can be controversial whatsoever, since I'm about to be throwing data, statistics, numbers, proof, evidence, facts straight into your face, which I'm not trying to intimidate you. I'm sure a lot of you are on the side of the silver shortage being a realistic thing, but some people still think it's a little bit of a myth, which I don't see how. But anyways, let's look at this first article, and I'll throw in the second article in a second. Demand for silver is greater than the new supply. Will it matter? The million-dollar question that either you are extremely for or extremely against. Comment down below if you are for or against this, or what you would answer if someone were to ask you this, because I think it's pretty obvious that it definitely will matter to a much greater degree than I think people realize. But when we're looking at supply and demand, they say demand is greater than new supply. Well, the second article that we're going to be diving into, pun intended, is mining industry seeks to define one global standard for ethical practices. The mining industry is in a very messy spot when you have these people that are wanting to go green to save the planet from global warming and climate change, zero net emissions. But at the same time, to reach that goal, we have to mine out all the cobalt. And if you've seen a cobalt mine, there's videos. These kids, 5, 6 years old, in bare feet, working for pennies a day with their pregnant mothers. And you see these lithium mines. And I think there's a book called Cobalt Blue, describes it, or it might be like a documentary. I think it's a book, but it's devastating. And even silver, the most recent silver mine in Canada got shut down. They protested it because water contamination, which ironically silver purifies water. Not to say that wouldn't contaminate the water, because it definitely would, but just kind of ironic. But you can see how that's a messy situation itself, where it's like, well, do you want to go green and get all these new gadgets and go this new digital era? But at the same time, to achieve that, we have to push these poor working conditions, or how could we make it ethical? How could we make clean coal? Is that a reality? I don't think so. So you can see the controversy there. But regardless, we're going to compare this because it is very interesting. And he actually does say, Phillips Baker, the CEO of Hecla Mining and the chairman of the Silver Institute, he said the one thing that I've said it's very controversial, that I've said, a couple other people have said, but not too many people are brave enough to come out and say it. He says it in this article, and I'll show you what he says and why it is so important. So let's dive into this. Silver production is failing to keep up with rising demand, but you wouldn't know it by looking at the silver price. And yes, there's a lot of corruption, which I think he mentions in here, price manipulation. It's blatantly obvious that $24 for an ounce of silver is extremely undervalued. So Phillips Baker, CEO of Hecla Mining and chairman of the Silver Institute, the metal's most prominent industry trade group. I call the Silver Institute the holy grail of information. Like when they post their numbers, every other site source goes off of their numbers, right? And the World Silver Survey down here. But anyways, the metal's most prominent industry trade group. I think that's important to take note of, right? So he's the CEO of one of the most prominent industry, trade groups that has to do with precious metals. which recently made a presentation at the LBMA, or London Bullion Market Association, Global Precious Metals Conference in Spain. And by the way, the LBMA also admitted their vaults of silver are near empty, and the COMEX admitted it as well, the two biggest. And the LME, the London Metals Exchange, also admitted it. So the presentation focused on silver's expected role in the transition to green energy, but it included some interesting detail on the market in general. Here we go. According to the Institute's press release, delegates asked Mr. Baker whether we will have enough silver for the green transition. Here we go. He replied in the affirmative, explaining that while the silver market is currently in a structural deficit, above-ground stocks of silver will be mobilized to meet the demand. Do you think this is a reality? He added, however, that there are no new significant silver deposit discoveries at present, and that geopolitical issues and mine permitting delays continue to be encumbrances to bringing new sources of mined silver supply to the market. So let's break this down. How many years in the future is he talking about we will be able to meet this demand? Because we already can't. Record-breaking supply deficits this year. Hundreds of millions of ounces in the red already. Demand exceeded 1.21 billion ounces. Production's around 850 million. Look, 822 million. Mine production right here. Recycling 180. So it's around 850 million ounces on a good year production. But demand is 1.24 billion ounces. And that demand is going to keep rising. Solar panel demand, doubled this year. EV demand will be tripling in the next decade. There's no way we can achieve this goal that we don't have enough silver. We simply don't. Maybe right now we could if we scrap together recycling and try to figure out some type of, but realistically in the next decade, we don't. So according to the 2023 World Silver Survey, demand outstripped supply in 2022 by nearly 238 million ounces, possibly the most significant deficit on record. Supply was about 20% short of what was needed to maintain the equilibrium. Silver demand rose in nearly all categories, and it will keep rising. So I want to ask you guys this. Do you think we have enough silver to go green? And why? Because I don't. Someone else, they said, if you think we have enough silver to go green, you're living in la la land. And that really hit me, because that's a good way to push it, very bold, very bluntly, because I seriously don't think so. The numbers don't add up. Maybe right now we could scrape on by, even though we literally can't. We're already in the red by hundreds of millions of ounces. I don't know why he said this, that he says we can. I want to read this again, because I think he's not answering this question in full context, because he knows what's up, right? I mean, he sees the data. So they ask him, do you think we have enough silver to go green? He replied, affirmative, that while the silver market is currently in structural deficit, above ground stocks of silver will be mobilized to meet. How, though? See, he says this, but how? The above ground stocks the stockpiles are dwindling. The LBMA, where they held this conference at, admitted their stockpiles of reserves are near empty. So where in the world, how in the world will these stocks be mobilized all of a sudden to meet the demand? That's the thing. It's interesting that he says that without explaining how. And then he goes on to say right afterwards, there are no new significant silver deposit discoveries. And then he goes on to say even more to the point against his first statement, and that geopolitical issues and mine permitting delays continue to be encumbrances to bringing new sources of mined silver And then they talk about how demand is. So it's like he says one thing, but everything he says after that and all the data showing after that goes against what he just said. It's almost like he answered that question not to start too much of a panic because he is the CEO of Hecla Mining and the CEO of the Silver Institute, which they're both extremely bullish on silver. Then it's being held at the LBMA, which admitted that their supply is dwindling. So it's kind of interesting that he said that one statement, but then just contradicts himself and the evidence given afterwards. So meanwhile, mine output fell versus the prior year, confirming what the Hecla CEO said about the difficulties miners face in bringing new production online. It's getting harder to find high-grade deposits, and it's even more difficult and expensive to develop and operate a mine, even further validating or contradicting his claim. The structural deficit in silver has now run for 2 years consecutively. The shortfall was 50 million ounces in 2021. The massive imbalance between supply and demand should have generated an explosive move in the price last year, but it didn't. The paper price of silver finished is 4% higher for the year. And that is exactly where the problem lies, is the paper price or the contracts or the extremely corrupt and facade demeanor of the COMEX and how they're acting upon this entire situation and the people behind the scenes. The COMEX is extremely corrupt. It's far worse than just spoofing. Because the first thing that comes to mind when you talk about price manipulation would be spoofing. Just very quick instances of people capitalizing, placing false buy or sell orders on these exchanges and canceling the order before it goes through. And then in return, everyone else on that exchange sees a whole bunch of silver being bought or sold. Then they, in return, invest on that exchange with a false narrative because they don't know those orders are going to be canceled. Then that's how to manipulate the price, by manipulating the people on the exchange that affects that price. But anyways, the shortfall, we start right here. The data for 2023 won't be available for months, but another deficit is likely this year, making it the third consecutive year of deficits. See, even validating further what he was saying is extremely invalidating his point. It's extremely contradictive. So go there and say, oh yeah, we will be able to maintain this, but then gives 20 other reasons and data points and numbers and facts that show otherwise. The shortfall must be met by pulling silver from above ground supplies. But how? Do you really think that's realistic? There are well less than 2 billion ounces of silver available on exchanges and publicly disclosed silver stockpiles across the globe. And beyond that, the amount of silver in the form of coins, bars, rounds, silverware, and other scrap is less known. Even further invalidating his point. So, to be sure, the massive supply of paper silver contracts that can be created on the exchanges, especially with the use of leverage, does create the potential for abuse, manipulation, or price dislocations. Exactly, the corruption, which is why in the beginning of this article, he says you wouldn't know by looking at the price, and this is exactly why. That is exactly why. Because they leverage these exchanges with manipulation and dislocations. So, however, with silver demand outpacing new mine supply each year, these supply deficits seem to likely put upward pressure on silver's price in the upcoming years. In the end, actual physical silver, not paper, is required to satisfy physical demand. How, though? Physical silver is required. Oh, yeah, okay, required to satisfy. Yeah, but how? You guys just gave me 20 different reasons why that's highly unlikely. But then, I guess just take that one thing he said out and just read everything else, and it's blatantly obvious. And that's probably why he said that one thing. Because if you were to sit here and say, no, we're screwed, what would silver's price do? Everyone would buy it up. He's the CEO of a mining company, right? You know how hard it is to find silver? It's a byproduct. Nobody's looking for it. He said mining is getting more expensive, plus all these other metals. It's it's probably not as black and white as you would think. But anyways, this second article is kind of interesting. I'm just going to highlight some points. I don't think it goes specifically into silver, but looking at precious metals in full detail, this is important. It even goes into the LME, which publicly came out and said they're having a hard time keeping up with their keeping, silver in their vaults. So I want to ask you guys a question, actually. Do you invest into anything else besides silver? Do you invest into gold or platinum, palladium, copper, anything else? I am very interested because gold is easily just as, I couldn't say just as valuable, but just as useful for other reasons beyond silver. Silver has more potential, but gold makes just as much sense, if that's a good way to put it, But like gold is a store of wealth. Silver is a way to capitalize on top of that. But I do think that a lot of different metals have opportunity beyond just silver. And by the way, if you wanted to purchase some silver or gold or platinum, I have deals for you guys. Every week, Miles Franklin comes out with silver, gold, and platinum deals. Send an email to info@milesfranklin.com. Ask them what those deals are this week or tomorrow. See the new deals. I'll let you guys know what they are. I'll even send some pictures of the coins. So yeah, let them know Slayer sent you. They'll hook you up. Andy Schechtman's the CEO, one of the most respected people and great guys I've met in my entire life. And so I'm going to wrap this video up here. Let me know what you think about this. Let me know if you think that we do have enough silver to go green and why. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe. This is Silver Slayer. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.